Hello there, today's single malt review will see us sallying forth once more down to Kentucky for some bourbon.
Yes, indeed. And it's actually a bourbon pretty dear to me. This is Baker's, named for Baker Beam, I believe the last Beam distiller or manager at the Jim Beam plant before they became before their Nose took over. Nose of Booker Nose fame, another brand that we have reviewed on the channel. But Baker's is very much on that same stable. It's a sort of a barrel-proof barrel selection, only this one comes from quite a different flavour space. This was allegedly Baker Beam's sort of favourite kind of a blend. It's what he enjoyed personally, and that sort of speaks to me that we would have had slightly similar tastes, because Booker Noses are all very good, but Baker's is really, really the one for me. This has almost everything I'm looking for in a bourbon, and I will try to explain why as we taste it.
So it's a 7-year-old bourbon at 107 proof, or 53.5% alcohol by volume.
So it's still plenty strong. It's not Booker Nose strong. It's not 60 plus.
But it's still the undiluted barrel strength.
But yes, so it's just from slightly leakier barrels in this case, and it is batched just like Booker Nose. This is batch number B90001, and what that means I could not tell you, but I'm sure you can type it in somewhere. Who knows? What it is a very, very dark bourbon. I don't believe there's
really
any
rich amber
treatment
colour
here, be it colour or chill filtration, as there most often is not with bourbons. They don't have quite the same problems with protein and fat clouding up due to the corn mixture. They're just not so much a danger. And given that strength is where it is, you're pretty safe there anyway. So we will assume very little, if any, colouring or chill filtration involved. So
it's quite a hot day here in New Zealand, and I can
it's
smell
heating up,
this
that's
already.
for sure.
There's already vapours coming off just from having the bottle open and the glass filled. So,
it's strong to say the least. This I usually have with a bit of ice, scandalous as that may be. I don't have any particular qualms about putting ice with bourbon, but this one, as the day heats up, we're getting about we're pretty well up to 27 centigrade over here. What that means in Fahrenheit, you would have to ask the Googles, but it's warm. It's warm. So that's a pretty good fumy nose, and
first impression I'm getting, it's a very strong vanilla, like a very rich sort of, if you've had a gourmet vanilla bean ice cream, that kind of a vanilla smell.
All the backbones of bourbon are certainly there, and vanilla being the primary archetype of it. It's there in spades. A lot of vanilla, a lot of wood, quite sort of dark, evident wood on this one, sort of like a varnished wood. And what really makes this Baker's stand apart for me, what really differentiates it from Booker's, is that it's a very, very sweet, spicy bourbon. It almost might sort of start moving into rye territory, which I know some people like and some people don't. This isn't a rye whiskey. It has, I think, a fairly traditional mash bill, so there'll be just a wee bit of rye in there, but not too much.
As a being bourbon, does that set some kind of restrictions on exactly what ratios of ingredients have to go in?
It has to be at least 51% corn, and that's really the only, as far as I know, which is not a great deal, the really only hard and fast stipulation. Must be 51% corn, must be matured in a new oak barrel. It
must be in Kentucky. Yes.
And not necessarily in Kentucky. I think the to be straight Kentucky bourbon, which is a rather strange term when you think about it. It has to be, all that has to happen in Kentucky. But to simply be bourbon, I think you can actually make it somewhere else, but who knows? Again, that might be a Google search away for anyone really interested. But as for the whiskey itself, very, very sweet, very, very spicy, which is what makes me think of rye whiskey. And at this full proof, very, very strong. So I'm going to put water in straight away.
Rich ginger and marmalade aromas coming off now, but it's warmed up a little. I'm going to try it first without water since I've never had this before, so it's going to be all new to me. And I've had other bourbons in the past which are perfectly drinkable at an absurdly high strength. Rowan's Creek, for instance, being a personal favourite.
This one I certainly can enjoy at full strength. I think that the heat of the day might be making it just a little overactive.
Oh, yeah, I've just taken a hearty sip at its full undiluted strength, and that's impressive. I'm going to go again just to get more impressions out of it. Bevy of spices. Some ginger, some allspice, a little bit of nutmeg, and some sugary dried fruit like dried apricots and papaya, certainly some crystallized ginger, and a lot of vanilla and oak.
It's, I think, on the palate where this one really, really shines. The nose is fine, everything's there, but it's fairly typical as far as good quality, strong bourbon goes. On the palate is where this sort of the flavours really bloom and come into their own and prove how diverse a palate it is. This one's regarded as a more simple whiskey than Booker's, but I think that's maybe a bit unfair. Booker's certainly has less common flavours to bourbon. That's a remarkably dry bourbon, Booker's. It has a lot of very dry oak. It has sort of cigar box, leather, tobacco, those sort of far less common flavours. So this one may be more typical in terms of the palette of flavours that it brings, but I think very, very atypical in just how diverse it is with those. All the spices you mentioned, I would entirely agree, and as well as the ginger, but there's huge quantities of mace and clove in here as well, alongside, and a tremendous sucrose, sugar sweetness that comes along with everything. Imagine really, really strong spice biscuits, sort of crusted with sugar on top. That's what this one really speaks to me of. It's really quite tremendously Moorish and just deeply, deeply pleasant. Maybe not as thoughtful as Booker's, but in terms of bourbon, and when I approach bourbons, I approach them for their drinkability. I'm still not quite on board with the whole bourbon as a terribly, terribly cerebral drink. For me, I have Scotch whisky for that. If I want to go down a whiskey hole, of which there are many, I still turn to Scotch for that. I just think that's where the two differ. Bourbon, I think, is built to drink and built to enjoy, and this one, very, very drinkable, very, very enjoyable. The finish is probably no more than medium. It doesn't go on forever, but you don't really need it to, because you'll be having a second sip long before you're going to be abandoned by the end of the palate, because that just will compel you to do so. If you're anything like me, it's just such a yummy whiskey.
Well, I've added water now, and I think I preferred it without. Adding water it's dulled some of that heat a little, but at the same time it's kind of homogenised the rest of the flavours. There are fewer distinct clear notes to it. When it was straight, at its full 53.5%, every individual flavour was kind of punctuated, very strong, very singular. Now they've just kind of melded into one, and it's more just a generic bourbon flavoured. It's a very, very good bourbon flavour, but it doesn't really have those standout key notes anymore.
Well, I guess it depends how you enjoy it. It is certainly drinkable at 53%. Maybe I would just start... It gets to be a little uphill drinking things quite that strong for any great length of time. But either way, scores for this one, bourbon scores. This one, like I said, I may be probably very much in this one's camp, just because it speaks to me quite so as much as it does. And though it's not quite as stellar as some of the really craft bourbons that we have tried, for something as readily available, for something just made by Jim Beam like this one, I think it's tremendously, tremendously strong. This is a 90 from me. What do you think?
I'll go close. As a straight up unwatered whiskey, it's very, very good. It loses a little with the addition of water. Simple solutions would be don't have it with water. That'd be fine. It's nuanced, it's rich, it caters to a different end of the bourbon spectrum compared to others we've tried, and that for me gives it an 88. It's really very good. It's a good age as well. It's not just fresh out of the barrel. It's been around for a while, but it's not super old and heavy and syrupy either. It's a good healthy medium, so it gets a good score from me.
So there you have it, Baker Beam from Jim Beam. I think maybe one of the more overlooked great bourbons out there, and one that you can find almost anywhere. You can find it almost anywhere down here in New Zealand, and that says a great deal about how something, how available something might be worldwide. If we can find it, goodness knows, you can probably find it. And it's one of the cheaper options as well. You can spend a exponentially great quantity of money on your true craft bourbons, but this is well within the affordable camp. Maybe not quite as exclusive, but I think very, very good, and an excellent intro into really good proper bourbons for people that are maybe more used to their Jim Beam white or black label and want to sort of go up to barrel strength. Really a craft bourbon in all but its packaging, really. There's no reason why a big distiller like Jim Beam can't make a craft bourbon, and this one very much represents as that. But at any rate, that's my recommendation for the day. Do have a wee look if you're interested. We will have a wee look at something else, and we'll be right back with you. Slanja.